Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Mark, and welcome everybody, and thank you to Outsource UK for organizing that event. It certainly is going to, well, hopefully it's going to provide value to all of you. And let me, well, first, go to Margaret, I think, before we deep dive on what we're going to do next. Let's talk a little bit about what's been the initial reaction to the COVID situation. Oh, Margaret, you'll have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me now. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Obviously, I work in financial services. I work in a bank, and like everybody else, we're in lockdown. The bank took a great step, in my opinion, in actually giving us the opportunity to work from home a week earlier than the UK went into lockdown. So we've been in lockdown for lots of weeks like everybody else. So I think from the first thing that strikes you working in a bank is that digital adoption has had a significant increase, or there's been a significant increase in digital adoption as a result of COVID-19. Clearly with social distancing in place, we have fewer people visiting branches or stores as we call them, and more people relying on technology to transact financially and to do their banking. What this has resulted in terms of our supply base and third parties that we work with and potentially suppliers we would work with is a far greater sense of community. So the reality is we're all in this together. Everybody on the call today is facing similar challenges. Say lockdown has impacted so many different organisations, but the supply chains and our suppliers have absolutely stepped up and worked with us to find solutions for the bank. I say specifically in the digital space, though many others. So for us, the things that we've done is we have worked very hard to identify any problems in continuing to provide the services that as a regulated organisation we have to provide. We've worked hard to maintain continuity. If there have been problems or issues, we've identified them as quickly as possible. We've brought together SMEs, both from our own organisation and often third parties, to help us solve and then implement solutions. And I guess a key thing for us is that we've been able to do many of these things at a far faster pace than we would have pre-COVID, because what we've all learned is what's important, which is for us service continuity, business continuity, and continuing to provide excellent customer outcomes and interventions and interactions. So for me, if we look forward, what will we take forward when we come out of this is far greater collaboration with our third parties, far greater problem solving. So when we identify an opportunity or an issue, let's work on it together. I doubt we will go back to the days where we spend significant amounts of time creating RFP documents the way we used to and going through laborious processes. I'm not saying we won't ever do it, but I think we will find ways to circumvent some of those processes, notwithstanding the fact that we have to comply with regulation. But I think we'll find faster ways to do things, trusting our partners and our suppliers more, and contracting for outcomes, because that's very much what we've had to do through the COVID crisis.
Yeah, no, thanks, Margaret, for this first highlight. And I guess that's when all of us had business continuity plans in the company we are working with. And I think when we talked earlier, we say everybody got a plan. David, how do you see that? Well, did those plans work? Were companies just ready, or you had to be creative?
Yeah, and hi everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation this afternoon. Yeah, I think most people took for granted that supplies of raw materials and or services turn up on time at the right place. It just happens. I think from experience in what I would call lean industries, I suspect that this period will have been problematic for some, particularly those who've indulged in low-cost country sourcing of one kind or another. the industry I'm in, the pharmaceutical industry, is probably, this is without any insult, far from lean. Just as by way of example, days of inventory on hand in your typical big pharma company is, easily 150 to 200 days of inventory. So I think that the pharmaceutical industry hasn't been overly impacted by supply problems. In fact, the business of the pharmaceutical industry has increased in these last 3 months, probably as panic buying and people are stocking, growing inventory of drugs. So we've actually seen our business increase, although we don't think that will be maintained over the full year. So I think, whether it's through good preparation or not, I'm not sure, but the pharmaceutical industry its supply chain hasn't been overly impacted. Nevertheless, I think probably in all industries and all procurement functions, people are working harder and longer than they ever have, because coming down from on high from the C-suite is anxiety about our supply chains, our suppliers in good positions, impact assessments on all kinds of things that have to happen yesterday. So the procurement function has been really, really busy to try and reassure the C-suite about our supply continuity and whether we have backup plans in place or not. And I think that's what the focus has been on largely over the last 2.5 months.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, David. And before I go to Jan, a sort of linked question to that. Well, given that we had to build up resiliency, work on inventory, make sure you get delivered, what's left of sustainable and ethical practice in all that? I think the question was for you, David, actually. Linking to what you said, sorry.
I beg your pardon, I thought it was for Ian. Sure. I think, again, it depends on the situation. If you are in an industry or in a business where your back is to the wall and you're fighting for survival, obviously some of these nice things may go out the window because it's, life or death situation. Fortunately, we're not in that situation in the pharmaceutical industry. So I think, we have the luxury, not everybody does, of trying to do the right thing and continue to do the right thing. So, treating the suppliers the way we've always treated them, with respect. Having said that, I think there is an increasing focus on cash. CFOs, rather than worrying about growth, are now worrying about their cash. And of course, there is a push from the finance function to make sure that we're not spending money where we don't need to. There's obvious things like travel. Nobody's traveling anymore, so our travel spend has gone down dramatically. I think CFOs are looking at the fact that we've all been working, practically everybody outside of the sort of production facilities have been working from home. Will we need in the future all of that very expensive real estate that we currently have? Or can we encourage our workforce who've managed to work from home, and our IT function has managed to provide the tools to do that, maybe to stay at home more often, and therefore reduce our footprint? So I think they're seeing opportunities to save money. I don't think we'll go back to traveling the way we did in the past. I think those days are gone. The professional travelers will have to find new occupations. And, from a real estate point of view, I think we were already moving to this hot desking concept. I think the concept of work from anywhere will grow. And, that will be seen as an avenue to save cash as well. And finally, maybe on the talent front, I think organizations will be reluctant to hire people. That probably goes without saying, even those that are not suffering as much as some. And therefore, the work doesn't go away. So they'll look to other avenues to get work done. So I would see a growth in alternatives, whether it be freelancing, contractors, outsourcing, what have you. Not just in procurement, but across the board in all functions. So I think that could be a change that we see as well.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you. And a number of interesting points, and we'll certainly come back on real estate and workforce of the future. I think that's something that, we all learn lessons through the current situation and think that we might want to take forward. Jan, one question for you as well. Well, actually, did you see or anything positive that's actually currently coming out of that situation in your world?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hello, everyone. Yes, we did quite a few things, actually. I think probably one of the biggest positives for us is the change in working patterns. I think following the COVID crisis hitting and coming on us quite fast, everyone's adapted really well to working from home. And in my particular case, I'd only actually been with the Met Office about 2 weeks when we went into shutdown. So I didn't get a lot of chance to do my networking and connecting. But I came from an environment at British Council where we were working globally anyway, so pretty used to Zoom conferences and video conferences, strange working hours, doing a lot of early morning calls to the Far East and a lot of late evening calls to the Americas. So it was sort of fairly natural to me, but to the rest of the colleagues in the Met Office, it was very weird, and they're taking some time to adapt to it. But I think as they have adapted to it, I think some people actually really quite like it. And I think it's demonstrated significantly that it is possible to work from home. It is possible to work remotely. And I think there's going to be a fairly major change in the way organisations work going forward to encourage and accept a lot more flexibility in terms of working patterns, working styles, and where people work from. And to a degree, at least in the short term, I think that's going to be essential, because most service organisations like ours have been working on a hot desking type model for some years now, and they don't actually have sufficient desks to house the entire working organisation anyway, even if they wanted to. And with the social distancing coming into effect now, I think there's going to be some significant impacts around office space. The other thing that it's brought out really is the importance of having good connections and good supplier relationship management functioning and operational within the organisation. The ability to be able to reach out to suppliers to understand what their issues are, allow them to come and talk to us about what their issues are, and jointly find solutions for it, I think has helped us immensely in trying to keep the wheels turning and keep everything flowing during the current shutdown. I think without that strong collaboration and cooperation with our supplier base, we would be struggling a lot more than we actually have. And equally, it's the collaboration with our counterparts in other parts of government, other public sector organisations across the UK. We've found that we've worked together very effectively, actually, in trying to resolve problems and share experiences, share challenges. And it's rare that we've come across anything that one of the other organisations hasn't already faced and found a solution to. So it's really encouraged that collaborative activity across the organisations, across the government functions.
Yeah, no, that's well, a lot of great points. No, thank you, Jan. I think the company I currently support, it's 20,000 employees, and today 98% of that workforce is at home, actually. So working from home might actually become the norm, and that's an interesting one we'll come to in a minute. I just like to link that back as well to suppliers. One of the things we actually had to struggle with in the first few weeks is some of our BPO suppliers, when their office closed in India, they actually realized only 25% of their workforce can work from home. They didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the bandwidth. So I think it's been a sort of, well, we had to find urgent resolution. We actually supported them to get to a point where most of their workforce could work from home. So what is a given in certain industries, and I work in technology, so it's a given for us. I think when you start going out of Europe or out in certain countries, is actually a lot more challenging. Which sort of leads to the next question around the workforce of the future and the global talent strategy. Margaret, how do you see that going forward? What would be the impact of the current crisis on that?
So I believe it will be easier to source people if we remain working in a remote way. because clearly you probably guessed from the accent, I'm Scottish, I'm Scotland based, and the drive and the desire to get talent globally has often been hampered by the fact that global relocation is extremely expensive. So I think as more and more of us work remotely, then I think the barriers come down in terms of where we can source the best talent from. However, I think there is still a challenge that we're all facing into if we do work from home. So like some of the other speakers, we have over 80% of our people working from home. Just now, I mean, typically it would be in small digits in terms of home working. But when you look at the people in the function who are less qualified or less experienced, for all of us, we've all learnt by sitting with people and buddying people and going along to a negotiation to see how it plays out. I think we all face a challenge in terms of how we develop people with less experience and give them the same opportunities that you would have if you were sitting together and working together. See, I know certainly I've had some excellent leaders and learnt lots from them simply by buddying them or joining them at meetings with suppliers or meetings with executives. So I think the opportunities for us to see the barriers to come down, people to be able to secure knowledge, skills and expertise globally, it will be so much easier if we're working remotely. But I do think we have to face into a challenge in how we develop people who are less experienced. And while some of that can be done using technology, I think we need to invest some time and energy giving people opportunities to develop. So I do think that's something that as an organisation we're facing into. I think all organisations will have to face into that challenge on how you grow people.
Okay. Nicola, if I can jump in on what Margaret was saying, I think she raises some good points. From my personal experience, I never worked from home, and I deliberately never worked from home. On Fridays, typically the office was empty. I would go to the office on Friday because I like to have a distinction between home, where I don't work, and office, where I do work. I know that not everybody thinks that way, and probably half the population, maybe the introverts, will be very happy to work from home, whereas the extroverts will be missing their colleagues and the social element of going to an office. So I think it's, this poses some problems. I don't think you can go from office work to completely working at home. I don't think it's realistic. I think it'll create other problems. So I think you're probably going to have a hybrid model whereby people are partially in office, partially working from home or wherever, on the beach in Costa Rica, wherever they want to be. But I'm not sure you can go from one extreme to another like that. It doesn't suit everybody.
Yeah, no, I think, and even also, I think definitely the level of maturity or seniority, the management style, and well, I would agree on the distinction around, well, having a home where it's not for work and a workplace where you work actually is something which helps the work-life balance. Now, one of the questions I've been asked a couple of weeks ago in the company I'm in is, well, do we need offices? And the question was serious. It was a sort of, well, CFO questions, because there is a cost in real estate. So beyond the risk, I think that was really more of a financial question. Jan, have you had those sort of conversations in Maths?
Not as such. I mean, we're fortunate to work out of a fantastic facility in Exeter, which is sort of relatively new, modern, fully equipped and sort of state-of-the-art type building. So, and the organisation is proud of it. But like I said, the basis or the basis upon which it was sized was around the fact that a proportion of the people wouldn't be in the office at any particular given time. So I think we've got sufficient desking to cope with about 80% of the working population that are based in Exeter to actually be on site at any particular given time. But I think that's based also on hot desking. And hot desking, at least for the time being, with social distancing, just isn't viable. You just can't do it. You can't keep the office clean enough. You can't keep all of the desks clean enough. So as we start to look at going back into the office now, and we are beginning to look at that. We're taking the first few tentative steps to getting people back into the office. It's going to be a slow process, and it's going to be phased. The word at the moment is that it's not likely to be fully back to fully manned basis anytime this year, and potentially well into next year, because of the implications. We're having to separate the desks a lot more than they traditionally are. People will have to have assigned desks to them again instead of hot desking. And obviously the cleaning regimes around all of that need to be restructured. So there could well be some significant real estate impacts on the Met Office. And it's a huge challenge. And certainly for my last organisation, they were about to move into a new facility this autumn that was purpose designed for them down at Canary Wharf, out of their old building in central London. And they were only anticipating 50% population of the desks there, based upon the working population in London. So they're facing a huge challenge. And I think a lot of organisations will be in a similar basis as well, that are in largely a service-based operation.
Yeah, no, there will definitely be significant impact on commercial real estate going forward. I'm sure that's one of the impact of the current situation that we will see. Before we actually goes into supplier management practices and reshoring and those kind of questions, Daniel, do you have a couple of questions from what we've covered so far?
Yeah, so we've got that, I think kind of leads on quite nicely from what you guys were just talking about, a question from David Ford. So David, I'll unmute you, and if you want to go ahead and ask or your point that you've written there.
Yeah, so really good discussion so far, and it's obviously we're all grappling with these types of conversations at the moment. But one of the things that I think it's important that we have to remember is that there's lots of positives about working from home, and I'm certainly an advocate of it. I'm personally really enjoying it. But there are members of our teams who it's actually not safe to work at home for various reasons. And I think whilst we're all sort of grappling with the what does this mean for the future of the workplace, and can we all work from home, we have to bear in mind that not everybody's situation is the same, and that actually for a lot of hopefully not a huge amount, but there is a portion of our population and our staff that can't actually feel safe, don't have the right environment to work at home, and we have to be cognizant of that as well when we're planning both the return to work and also the longer term planning about the future of the workplace. That was my point.
No, and that's a very good point. I think we, in the company I am with, I said 98% work from home today. We actually made a survey a couple of weeks ago. 15% of the people want to return into the office for personal reasons, because, well, as you said, home is not fit for work or for a number of reasons. But I think it's a good point. It might not fit for everybody. Plus, I think there's challenges around. Like, how do you build a company culture? How do you manage more junior staff? How do you train people? How do you create a social link in between the different employees in a group? So that actually gives a lot of different challenges.
And not everybody has the luxury of a spare room at home where it's quiet and that they can monopolize during the day for their business activities, things like that.
Yeah, we paid a lot of attention to the welfare of our team, actually, and so we have regular catch-ups with the team every week and make sure that we touch base with everybody frequently. But we also have just had a survey done around welfare, and there are some stresses and there are some mental health issues arising at the moment that we're having to try and deal with, and we are. Certainly, as we start to tentatively bring people back into the office, we are prioritising those that are very isolated socially, that are unable, that live alone perhaps, that have struggles in terms of the equipment, the facilities for being able to work at home, to bring them back into the office first as a priority. The other element that I think is also very valid about this is I don't know if any of you have heard of this syndrome called Zoom fatigue, which is around the weariness you feel after a long video call. After about 2 or 3 hours on a video call, you come out of it and you feel quite shattered, and more so than you would in a physical meeting. And it's a real thing. It really is there, and it really affects people. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of as well, and perhaps even change some of our working patterns for shorter meetings, more frequent breaks, gaps between meetings, so you're not jumping off one going straight into the next, which tends to be the norm. Because you get to the end of the day, and if you've had a string of back-to-back video meetings, you know about it when you get to the end of the day, and I think it's a real thing.
Yeah. On Deloitte in Switzerland surveyed their staff, and 60% said they'd like to continue not to come to the office. Therefore, the 40% want to come back to the office. I don't know how indicative that is of other companies, but there's quite a big a majority would like to continue to be able to work from home, and still a quite significant minority that wants back to the office.
Well, we're the same. I think it's just the same theme. We've recently surveyed our staff, and over 80% of people said they wanted to continue to work from home, but it comes with the usual caveats. People are expecting some choice around it, which I think we're probably all in the same boat. They're looking for some choice in terms of being able to go in occasionally, if that's required for the job or something they want to do. And clearly there are lots of dependencies on space and technology and kit. But in the main, most people in our organisation have said that they're enjoying the flexibility and they're enjoying the work-life balance. And one of the things that we talk about extensively is that might be the situation now when the weather's good. And I know that's a factor to bring in, that it's sunny, it's bright outside. That might not be how people feel when we start to come into October, November, where we have very short days and lots of darkness. So there's lots of factors we're starting to look at in terms of what happens when we come out of this. Coming out of it in the summer, we'll have one view of that, but we do need to think about the seasonality of it, specifically taking into account what was mentioned earlier around people's well-being, because it might be different, say, when we go into the darker winter months. So totally take on board that it's not for everybody, and that's why we're looking at what choice can we offer people to go back in, given that in our real estate we're expecting only to have 40% of the capacity we did have in terms of social distancing. So if it's 40%, who are the 40% of our workforce who should be in the office, and who are the people within that who want to be in the office? So it's quite complex for everybody, I'm sure. And we're just working our way through the various permutations of that now.
Margaret, I'm sure being a bank, you can come up with an algorithm and figure all that out.
Yeah, we'll get the actuaries on it. Yeah.
We talk about algorithm and AI in a minute. Actually, I think that's an interesting subject. But before we go there, actually, let's talk a little bit about some of our strategy and practice versus our supplier base. I think a lot of our companies had actually offshored a lot of the work, moved to consolidate their supply base. And then we are in a situation now where we start asking ourselves, is offshore the best options? And actually, Margaret, I'm going to stay with you on that one.
Okay.
What's your view on that?
So the bank hasn't outsourced or offshored, the bank hasn't offshored a significant proportion of our activities. We have offshored some IT capabilities, some IT functions, and that was one of the issues that we had to address very early on, because we had made a decision contractually and commercially that we couldn't or we didn't allow our partners' staff to work from home. So we had contractually written in obligations that they had to work on suppliers' premises. So when it became evident that India was going into lockdown also, we very quickly had to mobilise a team. As I said earlier, we identified the issue, get the SMEs together, we get suppliers together, and we looked, from a regulatory lens, commercially, contractually, what we had to do to allow people to work from home. And we did that very quickly, and we were lucky enough to be able to provide a kit. And our Indian partners, because it's only India, our Indian partners are still working from home. But it has opened up a debate in the bank generally about our use of third parties, because we haven't done a huge amount of offshoring, but we did have a number of parties that worked on our premises, providing various technology services and other services using our locations, mainly in Glasgow, actually mainly Glasgow, also in Newcastle. But it's brought to the fore the debate around, do we need people on premise, and does it then make any difference if they're on premise or they're offshore or they're in a different location working from home? And for us, there are clearly different price points. You know, it would be remiss of me to mention that. I mean, there are different price points depending on where people are working from. And for us, it's opened up a discussion and a debate now in terms of what do we want to do from a sourcing strategy perspective. Because if we don't have space in our buildings for all of our own people, do we want to retain space ring-fenced for working with third parties? So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly, but for us, we are now debating what the right sourcing model and the right sourcing mix is, whether it's, say, on-prem, outsourced generally, whichever territory, or offshored, because the world has now become a much smaller place in terms of providing services, because everybody's in the same boat when it comes to being in some form of lockdown. So for us, it's now very much an evolving picture of what we want to do with our sourcing strategies going forward. And clearly there's no, we won't make any quick decisions on it. That would be the wrong thing to do, but it has opened up quite significant debates about what we want the sourcing mix to look like going forward.
I think you did answer part of my question, definitely. That's where I was going in terms of, supply management practice. And that would definitely encompass, on-prem versus off-prem in terms of where your suppliers are located. I think what I've seen as well recently coming up in conversations for us is we had a portion of our suppliers doing application maintenance, application development, all being in India. For cost reasons mainly, basically, and the model works. It's been very effective. Then when the crisis comes that India started their lockdown, I think we actually saw a challenge there. So some of the conversation we have right now is actually on sourcing strategy. Should we deconsolidate our supply base and have one more suppliers in Eastern Europe or closer to home, or even in a nearshore location, basically? I think there is questions around the supply strategy which are being asked right now. Now, I think there is a debate in between, but it's like a supply chain versus CFO debate, because a lot of the things we did in the past were for cost optimization reasons, plus workflow, plus there was a lot of efficiency gain by consolidating. And now there is a question to say, knowing the level of risk, is it the right time to modify that strategy going forward?
Nicola, I think a lot of companies are asking that question and starting to weigh more heavily towards the supply continuity rather than on operational efficiency and cost effectiveness. Because lots of low-cost country sourcing or even single sourcing situations were done for those reasons, and it works fine until it no longer works. And this is one of the occasions where businesses are saying, maybe we need to rebalance that equation somewhat. Because just having it cheap is not enough if you don't have the product or service. It doesn't matter how cheap or expensive it is. You shut your plant down, you're not providing the materials to your customers. So I see that coming back to somewhere more balanced than it has been in the past.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would definitely agree. I think, I said earlier, we were going to talk about AI and blockchain and technology. And I think that's probably the right time to go there, because we talked about development and offshore. And I think there is an underlying question whether technology could be part of the answer on how we manage better the future crisis, or how we manage that current crisis. And Jan, I'm going to come to you with that. Actually, do you think that there is actually an answer there, that technology should be part of the answer?
Absolutely. I think probably the bit of software that if it hasn't been developed that needs developing, that's going to be the fastest selling piece of software in supply chain in the coming years, is something that helps organizations get a grasp on their supply chains, where they're located, and how they're made up, not just in the top tiers, but as it flows down through the supply chains. It's not always easy to know who your suppliers' are, and to be able to understand the impact of things like this, the global events that take place. And they talk about black swan events, once in a lifetime events, and probably this COVID thing might be. But there'll be another black swan along before we know it. There'll be something else that will be hitting, if not the whole world economy, then other parts of the economy. And understanding what the impact of that is quickly on your supply chain is going to be absolutely crucial. And I don't think it's ever been truer that knowledge is power in procurement. The more you know, the more you understand, the more you're able to analyse and draw conclusions from data, the better it's going to be, and the more power, the more control you've got over your own destinies and your own supply chains. I mean, in the Met Office, we're currently negotiating a major investment in a new supercomputer, and the whole rationale driving that is the need to process mountains and mountains of data and turn them into things that become meaningful and useful in terms of forecasting what's going to happen in the future. Okay, that's weather, that's global weather patterns and the like, but the same applies in procurement. The more data we get from our systems, our ERP systems, our spend analytics models that we use, the more we need to be able to manage and interpret and draw conclusions from that data. So the development in smart software, the development of smart systems, I think is certainly something that's going to escalate more than it has. And it's grown massively in my experience over the last 10 years. I've been in procurement all my working life, so it's 40 plus years, I'm afraid. And I've seen more developments technology-wise in the last 10 years than I've seen in the rest of the 40 years all put together. It's amazing. The new systems, the new technology, the new development is fantastic in terms of what it can do to move procurement away from the tactical and into the strategic. And I just see that ramping up more and more and more. And events like this will do everything to boost that, in my view.
Yeah, no, I would definitely concur on that. Now, I worked for a long time for data and information services company where AI is actually one of the prime development area, because as you said, the more data you have, the more technology you need to be able to analyze and predict. And there was a risk management product in there. And I think one of the things we've actually observed is that AI have been really great in a normal state of activities to actually draw predictions. But I think the struggle right now we have is that because it never happened before, AI can't really help for the current crisis. They would help in the future because, as you said, it's a black swan and it's likely to come back. So the next one, AI and humans will have more data and we'll have a pattern and we'll have things they could be analyzing. Now, I think there is another angle to technology as well. There is what AI could do in a year, in 2 years when we analyze it and predict for the next one, and then to the next one. But I think there is as well more basic technology like automation, like RPA, where you actually need as well a lot more from your current employees because there is a lot more work. They need to focus on where they could add value. So you don't really want them to process invoice. So you go back to machine learning and to OCR and to some of those technology, which not all companies have already adopted. I think that's probably started by there from those companies as well, is starting by automating what you could do and then goes beyond to use AI when the situation will have stabilized. Still linked to technology in a way, I think there is as well elements around how our suppliers' innovation strategy might evolve. And then Margaret, I'd like to come to you with that basically. Do you see, we've talked about changes in our supply management practices. We talked about changes in our real estate footprint. Do we see changes in the way we are going to interact with suppliers on innovation?
I believe we will. We actually have quite an extensive program in the bank to bring in new suppliers and to invite existing suppliers to share ideas. So we offer a program called the Spotlight Program, which third parties can contact my team if they have something new that they want to share with us. If they have, I say it could be an existing supplier who sees an opportunity doing something differently or providing a different service to the service we have today. And you know, it's been successful, but it's been quite bureaucratic. And I think if there's one thing as a big takeaway for my team, well, me and my team, in terms of the incident that we find ourselves in, it's that we're finding much faster ways to do things. We're finding that people, as I said at the outset, are much more collaborative. People potentially, you know, right across the organisation are more open-minded to look at new opportunities, new ways of doing things, because, you know, the world is shifting. And as I said at the outset, again, you know, we're a much more digital bank. So our Spotlight programme, which we've been running now for a couple of years, has been successful, but we have struggled to get people to really focus on the ideas and opportunities that will take us forward as a bank. And as by reducing the bureaucracy around it, which we're doing, and inviting more people in at pace, because it's easier to get people on calls now, because we know we're not trying to organise meetings of 10 people or 15 people. You know, you're setting up a Teams call or a Zoom call. It's so much easier now to not to plan face-to-face meetings, if we're being honest. So for us, I think we will see our programme now, you know, taking shape much more quickly than it has historically, because, as I say, technology has allowed us to interact in a faster way and take away some of the bureaucratic layers that we've previously had. So, you know, the invitations out there to all of our suppliers, as it always is, to come to us with ideas, things that are proven, things that are unproven, and we'll take a look at it in the bank. So I think, you know, we've got some great suppliers, some great supplier behaviours who are seeing the world change, who are seeing the opportunity from, you know, us all not sitting in offices every day and coming forward with a whole host of new ideas to support what will be the new bank, you know, as we move forward through this incident. So absolutely, yeah, I think and it's not, bearing in mind we're regulated, it's not any type of haphazard removal of bureaucracy. We're regulated, we will always comply with regulations, but I do think this has proved to all of us that see some of the bureaucracy we have around processes perhaps isn't necessary, that there are quicker ways to do things than we've done historically.
Nicola, if I can jump in on that one and maybe be slightly controversial, I think most large companies are pretty crap at this, at getting innovative ideas into their companies. And Margaret's touched on some of the reasons. You know, the onboarding process for new suppliers is very bureaucratic, very heavy. Imagine working with startups. We're just not set up to work with startups. We smother them, you know, with our 60-page contract, and would require them to have expensive lawyers to redline it and things like that. So I think, you know, we need to, more than technology, we need to have a mindset reset on how we do these things. Figure out a way of fast-tracking new supplier qualification process, because one, from a risk management process, if I'm single sourced, I need to quickly get a second source. That's the first thing. But from an innovative point of view, I need to be able to onboard small, agile suppliers who bring in good ideas. And if my processes takes months and months, they'll move on and work with somebody who can do it quicker and better than I can. So I think we're a long way from that today, unfortunately. I think most big companies are really rubbish at it. And I hope that this crisis may prompt some people to think about, you know, completely junking the existing process and starting from scratch and figuring out a new way.
Just to add an interesting twist to that, obviously I'm in the public sector, where our freedom to dispense with bureaucracy is severely limited. I guess the only thing I'm hoping for is that with the Brexit coming up, that what we'll end up with is some less bureaucratic public sector procurement rules. But at the moment, we have very limited ability to fast track anything, because there are prescribed timescales and processes that we are required by law to adhere to. So it's a challenge in the public sector still.
Yeah, no, thanks the three of you for that insight. And I think that's definitely, when killing bureaucracy is probably a motto there. And well, actually in the last procurement team at Adelaide, we actually created a small innovation procurement team, a sort of task force that their role was only to focus on innovation, and to actually, they had dedicated legal framework, they had a certain number of, well, processes that were adapted to deal with startup, to deal with innovation, to make sure we were capturing that. But it's quite difficult to set up, and most of the large companies, I do agree with you, David, are not set up yet in that sense. Now, I've got a passion for that. I even wrote a book on procurement and innovation. So that's something which I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of the companies I spoke to are actually looking at it in a different way, and are trying actually to say, well, it might need a different process, a different team, and a different focus, so we could actually have in place, well, a less bureaucracy, less process, so we could actually take a decision to work with startup before the startup dies, or make sure that we actually can put the product on the market we talk about before actually any of our competitors does. I think there is a lot of incentives to make that right, and that might be a result of that crisis. But I think it's another trend, I think, that started much earlier than that too.
Yeah, and Nicola, if I just say one final thing on this subject, I think something we haven't talked about, but it goes to the heart of procurement, is what do we stand for? What's our purpose? Why are we here? And you know, if you are a policing function, if you are a cost-saving function, then of course, you know, innovation is not going to be high on your priority list. If the reason for your existence goes beyond that, to create value for an organization, and you're going to be measured on, you know, bringing innovation into an organization and having it easily accessible, you're going to have to find ways to change the way you work. So you're going to move away from this bureaucratic, stopping people spending money kind of attitude into, no, we're going to make innovation accessible to our business, and we're going to do everything we can to make that easy and create value that way. So I think that's you know, an intrinsic question that leaders in procurement should ask themselves. You know, why am I here? Why do I exist? What's my purpose? And I think that will lead you to some of the answers you need to find.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think the positioning of a function, the industry you are in, I think there is a number of elements influencing that. Well, actually, we are going to come to the top of the hour in a few minutes. So, Daniel, is there any questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Mirko. I will unmute you now so you can, or if you can unmute yourself, go ahead and ask. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. So welcome, and thanks for this awesome event. My question goes to David. You mentioned this mind shift. How do you support, as a leader, this mind shift to foster more agile behaviors in your organization, but internally on one hand, but also with your suppliers? Do you have maybe an example or something you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to do that. So for me, it's not new, and I guess it's trying to take others with you in that journey. You know, CFOs typically press you on, give me my savings, give me my savings. And, you know, we're measured as a function very much on that. But beyond the CFO suite, in my experience, generally the business is not as interested in that as the CFOs. They want things that are going to help them in their daily life. So I'm always trying to connect with the business, trying to understand their pain points, their challenges, and then bring solutions from the marketplace to them. And that to me is a measure of success, the real measure of success. Now, of course, if I'm being paid a bonus based on savings, I will deliver the savings. But I say to my team, you know, get the savings done, and then let's move on to the real work. And the real work is, you know, partnering with our business functions very, very closely, co-creating strategies that are going to help deliver value for them. And I've got countless examples of that, having worked over the last years with, for example, I sat on the leadership team of Novartis HR. I'm not an HR professional, but I sat in the leadership team, and we helped create the strategies around talent acquisition and learning and development and many other areas. And the leadership of HR had never worked with procurement in that manner before. And it was very successful because they saw us as business people first and foremost, who happened to wear procurement hats, but we were true partners, if you like. And that to me is the measure of what a good procurement should look like. Yeah, and of course, did we deliver savings? Yes, we did, but that was never the primary driver. Because if you go into the room with how am I going to get my savings and how are you, the function, going to help me do it, that won't work. It's the other way around, is what are your issues, how can I help you? And if in the process we deliver some bottom line savings, great, and everybody's happy, but that's not the main driver. So that's what I try to do and have always tried to do.
Excellent, thank you very much.
No, thanks, David. I think it's a critical point. How do you create value for the function, for the company you are supporting, and how do you engage and manage the stakeholders are critical elements. Daniel, I guess we've got time for one last, if you have one.
Yeah, so I've had a question emailed to me. They are keen to know, how does privacy come into play from a procurement perspective with so many companies shipping equipment directly to users' homes? So I thought it's quite a good question that's between technology and that working from home piece, and how does that come into play?
Margaret, do you want to give it a go?
So we have a very strict data privacy team and program, and they assess what we're doing, what we have access to. We're very strict around anything that would include any customer information, and that's why we have a cohort of people that are working on our premises. So we are very strict about who can access what from where, as you would expect, and the data privacy guidelines cover that. So the people that are working from home are people who can, because of the nature of their roles. Otherwise, people are still working in offices as they would be.
Yeah, no, I think banks are known to be extremely structured when you touch data privacy and those elements around security. And I guess I guess part of the answer was already anyway, sort of long before people had to work full time from home. I think there was already structure around that, most certainly. I think I've seen it happening in other functions where they structure that, when the law evolved, and to make sure they were meeting all of the requirements. So it's more a test than anything else, I guess. Nothing new.
So it's why we wouldn't get to 100% of people working from home, because there are certain roles that have to be performed in that controlled environment.
Okay, no, thank you. Thanks, Margaret. I guess we are at the top of the hour, so that's probably the time to end our sessions for today. So I'd like to thank our three panelists, Margaret, David, and Jan. Thanks a lot for your time, sharing your expertise. Thanks to Outsource UK, so Daniel and Mark, for helping us setting up that event. I hope you found that useful, and thanks to all of our participants for being there.
I think just to wrap up and echo what Nicolas said there, big thank you to yourself, Nicolas, David, Margaret and Ian for all your contributions, lots of insights there. I'm conscious that the hour's up and Zoom fatigue might be kicking in, so just one final request.
I think it's an hour and 10 minutes it starts to kick in, right?
Perfect, thank you, David. We've got one eye on our next event already, and I know we have had some suggestions already, and there's lots of thought-provoking conversations being discussed today. So we'll follow up with all our audience, to whom thank you for attending, and thanks for those who asked questions. When we do follow up, if you would welcome your insights and thoughts on what would interest you next before we look to start scheduling our next one, and hopefully find something equally thought-provoking. Thank you once again, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.